If you had a garden this summer, you may be wondering what to do with all of those tomatoes. Well, we have a great recipe for you, courtesy of one of our diocesan priests, Father Brian McGrath, who happens to be an excellent cook. Father Brian invited Reel to Reel over to his rectory kitchen at St. John the Evangelist Church in Agawam and gives us a lesson on how to prepare a fabulous spaghetti sauce fresh out of the garden. We're here in the rectory of St. John the Evangelist Parish in Agawam in the kitchen with Father Brian McGrath. He is the pastor here at St. John's, and in his spare time he really loves to cook. And Father McGrath, thank you for welcoming us here into your kitchen, and we're so excited to see what you have to prepare for us today.
Well, thank you and welcome to all. It's going to be a fun day.
Yeah, so how long have you been interested in cooking, first of all?
Well, my mother says I started to cook when I was about 2 years old. I'm one of 7 children, and so when I was 2, my sister, my older brother was already born, and Sue was born, and Sean was in the womb, and so she was like, "Start, get your own breakfast," So, and then I started working in restaurants when I was 14, and put myself through college by working in restaurants. And then when I was studying in seminary, I got to know some of the cooks in the kitchen for the seminary, and they were great cooks and taught me a few Italian recipes.
So you're Irish. Do you have any Italian in you?
My mom's Italian, so yeah. Dad did the garden. Dad taught me how to garden, and Mom taught me how to cook.
Okay, so what are we going to make today?
So with the fall harvest here, we brought some nice fresh tomatoes and fresh vegetables. We're going to do my mom's famous sauce, the spaghetti sauce. So we're going to start by putting a pork chop into the frying pan.
Okay.
So we'll start with getting the sauce started by a simple thing.
And what kind of pork cut do you use?
Well, I tend to just get something with a bone in it. The whole point is to get that pork flavor into the sauce. So tend to get something with a little bit of fat, but not a lot. So I just did just your regular pork chop. I'm going to cover that up and let it cook up a little bit. So while that's starting to cook up, we're going to get some of our vegetables together.
Okay.
So we'll start with the onions. When you're cooking with onions, obviously you're going to cry a little bit, but
I'm going to start crying right away.
But I find one of the secrets to cooking with onions is get it to a place where you kind of get it flat. And take all the skin off of it. What's going to happen with the onion is we'll use some of it for our spaghetti sauce and then some of it for the meatballs later on. What you're doing with this is you're trying to get a little bit of chop so we have enough to give it some texture but taste more than anything.
What kind of onion is this?
I usually use Vidalia onions. They're a
Those
little
are
bit
good,
sweeter,
sweet.
not as strong as your traditional yellow onion.
My dad would eat these onions like an apple.
Oh no. So some of our onions going to go into a bowl for our meatballs later on, and some of them are going to go in with this. So a little bit of onion in here. And then some nice mushrooms. We could make them as big as we want. Since it's going to go into a sauce, we'll kind of slice them down a little bit lighter.
You ever go mushroom picking?
No, I have friends who do, and you have to, with mushroom picking, you have to know what you're doing because there can be really bad results.
Oh yeah.
But also, people who do mushroom picking, they're very protective of their spots. So I do love mushrooms. So this will be some mushrooms for the sauce, and we'll do a couple mushrooms for the meatballs. But the meatballs, we're going to make the mushrooms a lot smaller because then you won't even notice that they're in there except for the flavor. So some of our mushrooms are going for meatballs. And the rest is going to go into our sauce.
How long from beginning to end do you think the sauce takes?
Whoop. So this is really the great thing about spaghetti sauce. My mom would make this sauce that would be hours and hours and hours of cooking. And so you could cook it all day long. And then I liked it when it was on its second boil. So you'd cook it, have sauce one day, put the rest in the fridge or can it, jar it, and then you do another day, you'd have another, you cook it a second time, it'd even be thicker.
Yeah.
So these are just bell peppers. One of the interesting things about cooking is you cook to your flavor, your taste. One of my brothers is Sean, and he hated peppers. So we'd have to cook them really tiny. You wouldn't even notice that they were in the sauce. But you know, when I cook, I can make it my way. And sometimes I'll make this. This is more of a generic, you know, just a regular Sunday sauce. But you can make it with hot peppers. You know, arrabbiata, like a real spicy pepper. Or you can make it with really mild peppers. These like banana yellow peppers. All sorts of interesting tastes you bring into the sauce as you like it. Some of it's going to go in the meatballs and some of it's going to go in the sauce. So you have to really kind of make it a lot finer. And again, some people would not want to put a lot of vegetables in their meatballs. They tend to want just meat.
Meat and breadcrumbs.
But I don't know, I just love that it has, because the peppers won't cook all the way in the meatballs. They'll be still a little bit with an interesting texture, so you bite a pepper and you'll feel it. It's just in the sauce. It'll hopefully all boil down to almost red.
And do you measure or you just go by sight?
I get in big trouble because I ran a chef's club at my last parish with the kids, and some of my helpers were like, "Where are the measuring cups?" Well, does it taste like you want it to taste? No, add some more. You like it? Leave it there. So put some of these peppers in the sauce. We'll put some olive oil in with this. So the last two ingredients, again, are taste. So one of them is garlic, and I love garlic. So you have to decide how much garlic you like. With fresh garlic, it's all about the cloves. You find the bottom, and you cut off the bottom, and then you break it. And that just opens the skin right up. So it should be a little bit easier to take off the skin. Otherwise, it's really hard to peel the skin right off of it.
So how about the importance of having a meal together as a family? We're all so busy these days, and, you know, especially during the week.
Yeah, and, you know, when we were kids, there's 7 of us, so you can imagine how busy it got. But there was always time for Sunday supper, and so whether we had a big pasta or a pot roast or something, it was just something good to gather the family. And if you look at the scriptures, like Jesus gathers with his apostles or with the sinners or with tax collectors or with all different people, and it's oftentimes around a meal. And whether it be the multiplication of the loaves or the dinner with Matthew right before, you know, as part of his conversion, there's something special about sharing a meal together. What I'm making today could take hours. Like we're going to make it in about 20 minutes to get the sauce started. What will happen is you can make all sorts of meals in the time it takes just to boil the water and cook the pasta, and your sauce is ready. So this is our garlic. While we're doing this, why don't we get some basil?
And a lot of times you can make the sauce and you can use it for other things too during the week. You know, you could have maybe 2 or 3 different types of meals where you use that maybe for a chicken parmesan or
or pizza. You know, so you make your sauce, you put some of it in a Tupperware or in a can it or freeze it, put it in Ziploc bags. And also, let's say you get especially when the gardens are ripe, you get lots and lots and lots of tomatoes. You make a bunch of sauce, and then all winter long, it's not that hard to pull it out of somewhere and have another meal. So this is our garlic and our basil.
And are you an advocate for fresh? It seems like, you could use obviously a dried basil, or
Right. Yeah, and you know, there will be times of the year when you have to use a dry basil or canned tomatoes, or you know, there's lots of options on that. But I find the less processed food you eat, the better you feel.
yeah.
And especially when it's all fresh, local produce. I think the basil's from your garden, so
It is.
it's worth getting fresh if you can have it. All right, so while that's simmering up, we're going to start with our tomatoes. And again, you could get canned tomatoes from the store, but tomatoes are in season. So I grabbed a few different varieties. There's your regular plum tomato, which is your traditional sauce tomato. And then there's more of like a vine tomato, just a regular round. And these are my favorites. You know,
Ugly
they're
tomatoes.
the ugliest things, but they are so meaty, so good. And the thing you don't want to do with the tomatoes in the sauce is the skin. So what we're going to do is we're going to take water, and it's basically just boiling water. I'm going to put the tomatoes in the water, and it'll scald the skin right off of it. So we're just going to put tomatoes in.
Why are plum tomatoes so much better for sauce?
They have a lot more meat. Tomatoes, the one thing about sauce with tomatoes, and for some people it's the best part, that fresh, you know, marinara. You just take it right out of the garden and get yourself a nice marinara. My mom's sauce, it's thick. And so, you know, the more meat in the tomato, the thicker the sauce will be. And the taste too. So, and then you'll find the tomatoes you like. There are even acid-free tomatoes you can grow now. So we're gonna let that go, bring it back up to a boil. All those tomatoes take the temperature down. So while that's just getting to a point, we're gonna get the rest of our ingredients ready for the meatballs. Maybe a little bit more basil in there, or some basil. We haven't put any in it yet. So a little bit of basil.
And there's so many different varieties of basil too now.
Right, yeah. So what do we have in here? We have peppers and onions, and basil and mushrooms. There's both hamburger and then some pork, ground pork. And we kind of equal portions, maybe a little bit more of the hamburger. And then we have a little bit of breadcrumbs. And this is just to give some body to it. And one more ingredient would be eggs. And so crack a couple eggs in there. And here's where the fun starts. We're going to mix it up. You don't want to over mix it because then it becomes, I don't know, you wreck the
Pasty.
texture. Yeah, pasty. That's a good way to describe it. But you want to get it so that it mixes in. So that's that. I'm going to wash my hands and then we're going to get started on the rolling. I actually have a bowl. I put some cold water in it because I got to pull those tomatoes out. You see how the skin is coming off of them?
Oh yeah.
So they just come right off. Now, you don't want to touch a boiling tomato. So I put them in the cold water. Just take the temperature down a little bit. Just cool it down a little bit.
Now, some people would say, this is too many ingredients. Like my mom, for one.
Yeah. And
But you can make it fun.
right. And you can do it as you want to, because some people will say, oh, I don't want to have peppers in it or mushrooms or onion. You know, I'll just do sauce. But I mean, it doesn't take that much time to have all the varied ingredients, and they have their own taste that make it worth your while. So our peppers and onions and mushrooms have kind of softened, clarified. Our tomatoes, I'm going to take the skin off of them, and then we got them right into the sauce.
Are they hot?
When they're in the
It's
cold
cool.
water.
It's
Yeah.
cooled off enough.
And I'm cutting around the end, you know, that little green part at the end of the tomato. Now you see how meaty these plum tomatoes are. So
Oh,
they're
right, yeah.
almost all meat.
Yeah.
And again, you could buy the tomatoes in the can. And you can still get some decent varieties. A lot faster to make them. But something about fresh tomatoes.
Especially when it's the season, when you have so many. In September,
Wow.
people's gardens are overflowing.
Right. And you can make, again, gallons of this stuff put it in Ziploc bags or can it, or Tupperware, whatever works for you, and you make one big day of making sauce and use it all the rest of the year. So we get our sauce, our tomatoes, and we're just going to let them cook on a medium. Bring it up to a simmer, and then we'll just let it take its time.
Do you add water, or is that it just will
No,
get
you want to take away the water, actually.
Oh.
When we stir that up in a little bit, you'll see it'll be very moist. And we're going to try to kind of boil down the water a little bit. Ready? Good thing we
Okay.
washed our hands.
Just like snowballs.
Yeah.
Boy, this is a big meatball, Father.
Just getting it so that it goes around.
I like to cook to get my aggression out. Like if you're having a stressful day, you go and bake something or cook something and you forget about everything else.
Well, I usually don't get to cook until all the meetings are done for the day. And so I'll cook at like 8 or 9 at night.
Yeah.
And so it's a great way to unwind. And it is, like, you find, if I have a really tough week, I'll make bread. And that's my best get the aggression out. But chopping something and, working it out. And it's a great transition for me. It's a great way to de-stress. And viewers at home, I feel bad for you because you can't smell how nice this kitchen smells right now. But as you cook, the other thing is you make the house smell so good, and all my staff is peeking in and wondering when can they get a bite of all this. The other thing I've learned over time is to not cook with salt. I love salt, but I found that you can always add it. You can't take it out of your food.
This is true.
And so if somebody has a problem with salt, you don't want to,
Yeah, I didn't even think of that. You didn't put any salt or pepper or anything in.
Not yet. The pepper I will put some in because I love pepper. So we're going to take that
Perfect.
and put it right on our stove. I'm going to add a little bit of water just so that they don't stick as much to the bottom of the pan.
Did you put olive oil in?
No.
No?
The fat from the meatballs, the fat from the hamburger will kind of give it something to cook itself in. But the water kind of keeps it from scorching the pan. So we're simmering our meatballs. It's starting to turn brown. And again, with your meatballs, you can make a bunch of them, freeze them, use them for another day.
You can have meatball grinders.
Meatballs on your pizza. And then the sauce is simmering, so I'm going to start some water to boil. And let's take a look at our spaghetti sauce. So you see how loose it is? So it's almost like a
marinara.
right. And as it's cooking, it'll thicken up. So you could spend hours and hours. You could serve this up pretty soon. And it'd be just that fresh marinara sauce. And as it cooks, you see how the tomatoes that we cut into big chunks are now starting to break down to smaller chunks.
Right.
And even the onions and the peppers and all that are kind of melting into one sauce. And our pork chop is still big and full. But we're going to let that simmer for a while. And we'll come back to it when it's time to eat. So we're going to let that simmer for a while. Bring it down to kind of medium. We can even take the lid off or on, depends. But I'm gonna actually take the lid off and let it simmer. Let some of that some of the water evaporate out. And like my mother would let that cook for 6-8 hours on a Saturday afternoon or a Sunday afternoon, and we Sunday morning start it before go to church. We've been working for about 35 minutes. The sauce is done. Meatballs are almost finished. And we're gonna let them simmer for a little while. So our sauce has been simmering for a while. I like to thicken it up with a little bit of tomato paste, and then I love the taste of pepper, so we're gonna add a little bit of pepper. But if you look inside the sauce, you can see how it's really loose still. It's only been cooking for a little while, maybe about an hour now. And if I take the tomato paste,
And is that, what, 1 or 2 cans?
yeah, I think those are 4 ounce, 6 ounce, 8 ounce can.
You don't
one of the
measure.
small ones. I don't measure. Well, again, it's to taste, and it's like you kind of
can't
get
really-
a sense of how your sauce is shaping up, and then you add as much as you want. So notice how much thicker that is now. Almost a little bit of. We'll let that go a little longer. And then we'll have our spaghetti with meatballs. So our sauce is really cooked down. The little pork chop is really falling apart. It's so tender now.
Oh my goodness.
It's really thickened up a lot more. Again, you could cook this again tomorrow, you know, serve today's portion and then have tomorrow. I pulled the meatballs out into a bowl, and all we're gonna do is take a little bit of pasta. Maybe
And you
a lot
cook
of
it
pasta.
al dente.
Yeah.
This is a healthy portion.
Well, big boy. A little bit of sugo. Put a meatball or two on there. And then a little pecorino romano. And you have yourself a little spaghetti meatballs.
Looks delicious.
Buon appetito.
Thank you.